Good evening. Welcome to Audit and Governance this evening. Probably the hottest day of the year, so good choice. I've been asked if you could make certain that you speak directly into the microphone. Been some complaints about the sound, so if you could, I'd be grateful. Right, item 1, apologies. John.
Apologies for absence were received from Councillor Flower and Holloway.
Thank you very much. 2 minutes to confirm the minutes of a meeting held on the 2nd of June 2025. All happy with those? Yep. Excellent. 3 declarations of interest. Anybody have anything to declare? Nope. 4, public participation. It's proving to be a very popular venue, this particular. Okay. 5, as usual, no meetings held. And then we move to 6, which is to consider a recommendation by Jonathan Mayer, the monitoring officer, to consider the swap investigation report on the 7th of July. Do you want to say anything, Jonathan, at this stage? Thank you.
Chairman, nothing to add from me unless members have particular questions. Thank you.
Hopefully they're going to save those. I did email everybody, everybody came back and said they were happy with that. So if just about the timing of a meeting, it's been suggested that we might want to go for 5:30. Does that cause anybody any issues? It does. Belinda.
I did ask about the planned meeting time. I was told it was 6:30, so I'm just going to check my diary, but I'll juggle.
Okay, so broadly speaking, everybody's happy? Yeah? Okay, well that's what we'll do. It will be in meeting room 1, it will be at 5:30, and it will be next Monday evening to consider the report in depth. It'll be the single item on the agenda. Thank you, and now we're going to jump because Ben Wilson is for our future council. He's in South Africa. Is he online? Yes, he is. Ben, can I ask you to introduce us? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were asked to come to Audit and Governance to explain the specifically the governance structures that have been put in place over the Our Future Council programme and how those structures are operating. So I'm going to hand over to the officers to talk us through the report in a bit of detail. The only other thing to add before I do is that we have instructed SWAP to perform an internal audit over the same the same piece of Our Future Council, but in particular look at how those structures have been working in operation. Unfortunately, the SWAP report isn't yet available. So this will be something that the findings will become clear in early July, I hope. So the two between this audit and governance review and the SWAP report will obviously be helpful feedback as we move forward with the Our Future Council programme. So I think I'm handing over to Aidan to talk in a bit more detail.
So that's Aidan, better known as Lisa, I believe, isn't it? Thank you.
No, sorry, it's Lisa. Sorry, I can't see you.
It's fine, it's fine. Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wilson, and good evening to members of the committee. And thank you for this opportunity to present an update on the governance arrangements supporting Dorset Council's transformation activity, including the Our Future Council programme. So as you'll be aware, the Council faces significant financial challenges, and in response we launched Our Future Council, which is a bold whole council transformation programme designed to modernise how we work, improve customer experience and ensure long-term financial sustainability by reducing duplication, making better use of technology and digital solutions. So while the delivery of our future council itself is not within the scrutiny of this committee today, members have asked for reassurance that robust governance is in place, and that is the focus of the report that you have. Our governance proposals were first set out in our transformation plan 2025 to 2029, which was published earlier this year in January. And this plan outlines how we will manage both the Our Future Council programme and wider service and directorate-led transformation across the organisation. It's important to recognise, and we ask committee to note, that while our Future Council is our whole council transformation programme, it must work alongside and align with other significant service and directorate-led change. Our governance framework is designed to support all transformation activity so that we can prioritise effectively, align resources and capacity where they are most needed. So in your report, you will now see that we've established the governance framework in place, which includes a transformation board that is chaired by Chief Executive and provides strategic oversight across all change activity. We have a dedicated programme board for our Future Council, which meets weekly, and that is focused on delivery, risk and performance. We have a cross-party member steering group, which meets monthly, and that ensures political oversight and transparency. And we have a new transformation office that is formed as part of our new operating model, so that is developing now, and that is intended to coordinate delivery, service design, manage risk, and ensure alignment with strategic priorities. As Councillor Wilson has said, we've requested independent assurance from South West Audit Partnership, whose review is underway, however, to point that no concerns have been raised to date. So they are actively observing and joining our governance meetings as we hold them. Risk management is embedded throughout with structured reporting and clear escalation routes. And looking ahead, we continue to wish to strengthen our governance maturity. This includes embedding our gateway approach to change, supported by our technical and organisational design groups to ensure that all transformation aligns with our operating model and enabling strategies. And in summary, to close, we are providing this report to give assurance that governance is in place, is adapting as we learn, and is evolving to meet the scale and ambition of our transformation. We welcome committee's support in helping us to continue to mature our approach. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Do I have any questions? Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Simon Roach, co-opted member to the committee. Thanks for that overview. That's really helpful. I had a couple of questions, actually. So just to start with, looking at the organisational structure or the governance structure that you've put together, that's a fairly typical structure. I've seen that many times before. I guess the question I have about it, though, is that in the narrative, it talks about you pooling resources into a number of sort of central servicing groups to ensure optimization of the alignment of those resources and deployment of those resources to change. Now, the directorates we have seen, certainly over the last year or so, when they've been challenged with savings targets, they always fall short. So that's almost without exception. I think there is one exception this year. But they always fall short of their savings targets. And as you pull resources into these centralised pools, I would argue, I would contend that actually that makes it a little bit more challenging for those individual directorates who you are tasking with direct accountability for delivering the benefits and the savings of this initiative. It makes it that much more difficult. And I would argue that based on my own personal experience of working in the central teams and leading organisations that have to consume deployed resources to get work done. And so my kind of core question is, given our experience of the directorates falling short And given the criticality of this programme being necessary to deliver the benefits that it's set out, what are you doing to manage the risk that those directorates don't deliver? For example, are they getting stretch targets so that individually, in aggregate, they deliver more than the totality of the programme, such that if some of those are missed, we still actually deliver on the headline number, given the criticality of hitting the headline number? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Aidan Dunn, Exec Director for Corporate Development and Chief Finance Officer. There's a few layers to that excellent question, which we've been asking ourselves as well. So I'll try and give quite a sort of an answer from a couple of perspectives. First of all, there is something about changing the way the organisation is organised, effectively a restructure, to seek economies of scale. So what our research has shown us that each of our directorates there's a degree of duplication within those directorates. So part of our future council is to bring together and centralise in the strategic centre similar services so that we're able to get the economies of scale. So there's something there about managing our resources. The second element, I think, in particular, if I could draw attention to the diagram on page 407, it's a colour organogram of the governance that Lisa's talked us through. In the middle of that is the 3 boxes in orange, and one called the Technical Design Authority, one is the Capital Strategy and Assets Management Group, and then thirdly, the Commercial Board. And what each of those 3 pillars are doing is looking at the organisation as one single council. And that's an evolution of the model that we've had previously, where the council has tended to operate on a directorate by directorate basis. So by having those 3 strong pillars of governance, we get the view across the council and able to make decisions about priorities, about resourcing, that really take into account the council's priorities, not the individual directorates' priorities. The third element of the challenge we're grappling with is a really live one at the moment, is that our future council financial savings targets are about, as I've described, consolidation across the council, looking for efficiencies across the council, but also on the right-hand side in the green boxes, we've got directorate savings targets as well. And for this current financial year, the directorate savings targets are higher than our future council savings targets. But as over the next few years, we think the balance is going to shift. So the crucial element is, how do we make sure that we have sufficient resources to enable all of those services, all of the directorate savings targets to be achieved as well? And this is where our future council feels different. The fact that on a sort of weekly basis, as Lisa was describing, the senior leadership team is focusing on our future council. We're looking at the Technical Design Authority to make sure that the decisions are taken for the best interests of the council. So this altogether, coming back to the opening point, we are in a world where we've got less resources, so we're looking to operate more efficiently. We're looking to achieve that through economies of scale, but we're also looking to make it by making very clear, prioritised decisions from a council-wide perspective rather than a directorate-based perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Aidan. So can I just clarify my understanding then? So for the economies that are coming out of our future council, it's not the directorates that are being held accountable for delivering those savings. Is that right? Have I understood that correctly? Because they've got their own savings targets, but they're not accountable for our future council savings. That was my understanding. That was the basis of the question. Thank you.
So the senior leadership team is accountable for the £10 million savings target. Within the budget profile, or in the budgets for this financial year, we have allocated each directorate a share of that 10 million to make sure that it's absolutely focused. But the reality is that some of these savings are already being achieved through, for example, vacancy factors. And so those savings arrive on an opportunistic basis. So they're not necessarily in alignment with the individual directorate targets. But ultimately, the senior leadership team is accountable for the delivery of the £10 million.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. May I have question 2, please? Thank you. Yes, so my second question is about the transformation as far as your end customers are concerned. So it's a technology-enabled transformation that you are doing, and you'd previously mentioned about, for example, things like artificial intelligence and other technical solutions. So given the high population of Dorset residents that are elderly, and given some of the challenges that they might have with interfacing with a highly technically enabled service organisation, what are you doing, or what are you planning on doing to engage directly with customers, with the end users of the services that you are defining, to ensure that that design work works for the population? Thank you.
If I can start, and then I'll bring Lisa in, if I may. So there's the technology investment. Some of it is about making the organisation more efficient within Dorset Council, how we operate. So that won't necessarily impact on our residents. So, for example, at next month, or sort of next month's cabinet meeting, we're going to be coming forward with a proposal or recommendation to buy a new ERP system, our enterprise management system. So that will enable us to operate more efficiently as a council and shouldn't directly impact on our residents. Other aspects, we will be looking to enhance the customer experience. I'll hand over to Lisa on that.
Thank you, Aidan, and thank you for the question, Councillor. And it's absolutely right for you to ask that question. And earlier this year, one of the enabling strategies that we have alongside our Future Council is our customer strategy, and it absolutely speaks to that point. So we're really very, very aware of our customer insight, of our demographics, and our customer strategy absolutely looks to ensure that customers are supported to access services easily, and where they need that help, we are there to help. So we are designing our services to make sure that if the customer needs our help, then we are there as we are now, whether that's face-to-face in our libraries, whether that's over our telephone service, we can offer that support. We already have a lot of digital solutions in the organisation, so we operate already. This is about really streamlining that and using the best, most advanced technology that is available to us now to really make sure that we're making that even better, so that we enable the able to really use those services at a time and a place that's really convenient for them. Those customers that don't want to have to speak over the phone, that do want to transact with us digitally, and make sure that we have the resources and the capacity within the organisation to really support those most complex customer inquiries and those customers, our most vulnerable customers that need us, and make sure that they have the help and support that they need. So our customer strategy is there to support the design. We have our design team also includes user experience, user adoption and digital inclusion colleagues who are absolutely experts in supporting us along the journey of design, making sure that those services are fit for purpose.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. It's good to hear that there's a real focus on design and user experience where you're putting in new technologies. Then one last question, if I may, and then I'm done. Thank you. So my question is about the engagement of SWAP to look at the governance structure. So transformation initiatives are obviously very different in their nature from operational aspects of running services and businesses and local government. Because transformation is novel, you're kind of creating a new way forward. It's a different journey every time because you're designing a new future. And therefore, there's a portfolio of risks and an approach to governance that needs to be a little bit different than, if you're looking at operational services and financial control and those sorts of things. So my question about the SWAP engagement is, to what extent is SWAP bringing expertise, special expertise around having seen and experienced and observed large transformation initiatives of the size and scale that we're talking about here, so that they're able to bring new insights and new value to the review. Thank you.
Who would like to respond? Sally.
Yes, thank you. Sally White, Assistant Director, SWAP Internal Audit Services. We do have at our disposal all of our partner organisations. To be fair, in terms of the piece of work that we're doing at the moment, it is looking at the governance structure. It is quite a contained piece of work. As we undertake more work, we will go out to our other partners. Clearly, we are only able to draw on those that have that experience. If they don't have the experience out there, we can't draw on it. But I'm sure that some of our partners have undertaken some of these significant transformation programmes that Dorset Council is embarking on at the moment.
Okay, thank you. That's great to hear. There's some specific expertise going to be brought to bear because this is a really, really important initiative with a big savings target associated with it, and it's novel and different. And I'm glad you're bringing some extra expertise to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody else? Right. If I could just refer back to Simon's question 1 and going back to the chart on page 407, I think it does, on the face of it, appear to be a bit of a disconnect because it appears that the directorates are making the savings on their own and they're not interacting with our Future Council programme because they come in over and above where they feed in. It seems to be above our Future Council programme. And I think I would have probably expected them to feed in below to join the two up. Is that, Simon, something that is that what you were trying to refer to as well?
Yeah, I think my observation was more about the complexity that's created as you've got sort of 6 or 7 shared services and 5 directorates. That's 35 touch points you've created. And then, as we know, the directorates have struggled to deliver targeted savings. And so as you create complexity, that increases the risk and probability, in my view, that you can actually deliver those savings, and the accountability is crystal clear on who's going to do it.
Yeah, so all I was looking for was the assurance that the overall programming is inclusive, regardless of what savings they're making within the budget process. It is still inclusive of the directorates, so because a lot of the things surely are co-joined anyway. So if you improve efficiency on one, the outcome is a saving in their current year budget. But it just seemed to me that it indicates that they're very separate things. And some of the wording afterwards doesn't really give me that assurance that the whole thing's working as one. So going back to the governance, that would mean that it doesn't quite fit For me, I just wanted an assurance that that's not the case. So can I just check, Ben? Did you had your hand up? You put it down. Did you want to comment?
I can comment. I mean, it's a valid question, but the accountability for delivering the directorate savings does not shift from the directorates because of anything that our future council is doing. There may be elements that need to be delivered within these hubs, with all the shared services, as Simon describes them, and the governance of those hubs is set up so that can be delivered. The bigger risk is not one of complexity. I say the bigger risk is one of double counting, because if you're driving efficiency through the hub and you're driving efficiency through the directorates as well, there are some elements that may overlap, and that is what really needs to be actively managed through the governance processes. But I don't think there's any doubt about the accountability for delivering those directorate savings. That doesn't get blurred. So that was my first point. The second point is, I mean, we're talking here today about the Our Future Council governance, but the more important thing is actually the Dorset Council transformation governance, and the transformation board that you've got in the paper there, and the design authority and the technical design authority cover the full breadth of the council. They're not just Our Future Council. So all transformation projects, whether they're directorate led or whether they are in the hubs or shared services, they need to go to that design authority, and that's where that can be managed between them, and we make sure that things are complementary and they're not trying to eat each other's benefits. So the governance is set up to ensure that both can be delivered.
Okay, thank you. Andy, did you want to add something?
So many of us have operated in organisations that have centres of excellence in the past, and they can give directorates access to unutilised capacity and optimise the way people work. It does preclude the need for specialist knowledge. I just want reassurance, I suppose, that the commissioning officer on adult social care is able to equally operate in housing, for example. I'm being superficial, I know, but I just worry that there's going to be a degree of moving seats but not changing of roles or workload. So is there actually capacity to take up? And as others have mentioned, the separation with the directorates appearing separate and with them being ultimately responsible for the delivering of the savings, I worry that the leaders of those directorates, when they realise that collectively they are not able to deliver what they're supposed to deliver, go rogue and start acting independently to source their own solutions. I've seen it happen before, and I just wouldn't want to see the duplication of effort going on here.
Right, okay. See, there's more of a comment than a question. So I think we broadly had the answer. Did you want to add anything at all, Aidan? Just
Thank you. So this committee is about assurance and potentially reassurance. And one of the themes is the complexity of having savings targets within a directorate as well as a central savings target. One of the, and Councillor Wilson's talked about the risk of double counting. One of the tools that we've got and we can share with you outside of the meeting perhaps is a dashboard that tracks all of those savings and sort of risk rates them, RAG rates them. But I think the more assurance that you'll get is when you receive the Q1 finance report that will be coming sort of in a couple of months' time. Be very clear that the directorate savings targets and performance against those, but also there will be the Our Future Council savings target as well. So it will be clear, and that hopefully gives you some assurance.
Thank you. Unless there's anything else, we will move on. We'll jump back from 12 to 7, I believe. I believe Mark Ayres is not here tonight. Mark Ayres is not here tonight, so who's... Oh, he's online, is he? Oh, yeah. Oh, so he is. Yeah. Well done. Over to you then, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. And first up, I'm sorry I'm not able to join you in the chamber this evening, but thank you for allowing me to attend virtually on this occasion, because I appreciate it's never ideal. A brief bit of background for the committee and also for any members of the public that are listening in. The annual governance statement is a statutory requirement. It's one that's signed off by the chief executive and the leader alongside the annual accounts. And as the name suggests, it's a statement providing a level of assurance over the organisation's governance arrangements. It's supported by a local code of corporate governance, and it follows a structure that's set out by CIPFA and SOLIS. The content for us has been arrived at following liaison with allocated theme leads across the council, and it looks back over the 2024-25 financial year. The statement and the supporting local code set out the various governance mechanisms that we have in place, and also whether perceived to be gaps or improvements. These are reflected within an improvement action plan at the end of the statement. So ordinarily, we would have presented a draft of the statement to the April committee ahead of signing as a draft document for comment and observations. The item, though, was removed from the agenda this time around as we were conscious of the ongoing swap investigations, which could impact significantly on the level of assurance that was being provided. And by those investigations, I'm referring there to the swap report on contract and expenditure compliance with council constitution and scheme delegation that was considered at your meeting on the 2nd of June, and the second investigation report that Jonathan referred to in the first item on today's agenda. The wording in the annual governance statement was reviewed, and it was updated in the context of those investigations and also in terms of the swap annual audit opinion. The action plan reflects the work being done to respond to the outcomes of the investigations, including noting that the committee has established a group of councillors to oversee the response to the findings. As I was really conscious that there hadn't been an opportunity for the committee to have any comment or oversight in April, I did circulate the draft at the earliest opportunity to committee members outside of the formal meeting for any comments or feedback. And since that time, some minor changes were suggested and have been reflected within the statement that you see today. Since the publication of the agenda papers, it was agreed that the annual accounts and the supporting annual governance statement would be published in advance of this meeting in order to meet the deadline of the 30th of June, rather than post-meeting as I suggested in the paper. The wording that's been signed off by the chief exec and the leader is as per the version presented to you today, though, and the assurance statement pretty much mirrors the audit opinion presented to the last committee, insofar as recognising that generally there's adequate internal control, governance and risk management in place, but that in view of the investigation findings, the statement is suggesting a limited assurance, essentially, I think, in terms of some of the compliance in relation to the control mechanisms in place. The annual governance statement is a snapshot in time. The supporting local code of corporate governance, though, is a working document, and the actions that are identified within the statement will be monitored throughout the year. The final point I wanted to note was that CIPFA and SOLIS have, in May, updated their guidance note on expectations for the next year's 2025-26 annual governance statement. Now, I need to look at that and understand the implications in more detail, but on the first glance, it looks more stringent in terms of next year's sign-off. I will circulate that guidance to the committee for reference, but it includes a suggestion of possibly considering a governance group of key officers to monitor the statement and the local code, and also for the audit committee to consider the robustness of the underlying evaluation. As I say, this will take effect for next year's statement rather than the statement in front of you this evening, but it may be helpful perhaps for us to build something into the forward plan to agree the committee's role for next year. And I'll stop there, Chair, and then invite any questions if I may.
Thank you, Mark. Questions? Simon?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Simon Roach, cooperative member. Just one quick question on the item on page 52/53, which is about to ensure robust internal control. Obviously, the future work, identified improvement, that is identified there is about responding to recommendations with internal audit about contract and expenditure compliance, as we learnt about last meeting, and we have another session in a couple of weeks. My question, though, is the scope of the change that needs to happen. So will that include, and do any of the actions so far identified include, changes to governance? So obviously the events were a failure of internal control. The fact that we weren't aware of them is a failure of governance. And obviously this committee is part of the governance process. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you hinted last time that maybe there needs to be a slightly different agenda for us going forward to ensure we've got the oversight right. The question is the scope of the governance and oversight, not just the correction to internal control, is that part of the action plan? Thank you.
Mark?
If I start, and then it may be other officers want to build up, because I'm not cited on exactly what's in that action plan. But I think certainly if we were looking at what the recommendations are saying for the statement next year, that is exactly the sort of thing that is tightening up on, is looking at getting that sort of greater level of assurance that your actual controls and things that you put in place are actually operating effectively, and it's bringing in the role of the committee to add value in that respect as well. So I think obviously I'm not in the room, so I can't see exactly who's in there, but it may be an officer that's more closely aligned to that particular action plan following the investigation may want to make some additional comments.
Jonathan, would you like to add?
Thank you, Chairman. Jonathan Mayer, Monitoring Officer. And Mr. Roach is absolutely right. It is not just about those internal controls. It is about governance, but it's also about culture, because we seem to have a significant part of the issues that arose through that investigation was a culture of non-compliance with our own rules. So I think it's more than it's more than governance. It's more than internal control. It's also culture that we need to tackle, and we will pick up all three of those. And I'm sure we'll be addressing some of that in the workshop session for the committee next week.
Belinda.
Thank you, Chair. Belinda Borden, Lyme Regis and Charmouth. So just following on from that, can I just ask what member involvement will be in that process? Because I think that some of the recent reports that are coming to light have left us feeling in the dark and not consulted and frankly patronised. And I would like to know that our voices are going to be heard in this as well. Thank you.
Jonathan, would you like to make a comment?
Well, first of all, for Councillor Borden, Chairman, no intention whatsoever, and apologies if anything has come across as at all patronising, because that's certainly not what's intended from any of the officers. In terms of member involvement, I think we've already signalled a very significant change with the recommendation to your last meeting and your decision that you would have a member oversight group looking specifically and overseeing the work and recommendations coming forward from officers in the light of the swap audit that you considered. And again, unusual for your next meeting to be meeting more in workshop style to really get into the issues. So I think the intention is absolutely there to help you work differently and for us as officers to work differently with you, and certainly not to be patronising.
Simon, did you want to add something?
Yeah, Councillor Simon Clifford, Cabinet Member for Finance. I have publicly stated on the record that I want us to produce an opportunity for all councillors to ask questions in a public forum. I stand by that.
Happy? Well, if you're not, you can tell us all about it next Monday. Right. So we note that, and we will move to 8, which is the draft outturn report, and I guess that will be Sean Kramer. Thank you.
Hi everybody, good evening. So Sean Creamer, Corporate Director for Finance and Commercial. This paper follows presentation at Cabinet last week, so I'm just going to run through some of the headlines and then perhaps move to questions. So headlines in the paper, the revenue position shows a 6.7 million overspend as at the end of the 24-25 financial year. That's an improvement from the Q3 paper that you saw of 4.1 million. So essentially it reduces the amount of reserves that are required to balance the position. Within that net position, there's a service overspend of just under 10 million, and there's OFC savings which weren't delivered, totaling 8.6 million. And then there's a kind of a counterweight underspends or over recovery of income within central budgets of 11.9 million. So that includes the full deployment of the contingency as is intended, and then also an over-recovery of collection fund income of 3.8 million, which brings us to that net 6.7 position. Moving on to the dedicated schools grant, the DSG aspect. So for 24-25, that overspent by £37 million. That does remain essentially the single biggest risk to the organisation. As part of recent government announcement, the statutory override has been extended for another 2 years, with a promise of an intended approach to SEND reform being set out in a white paper this autumn. So we eagerly await that that kind of the roadmap to solutions as to what we do, and we remain engaged with the DFE on discussions about our own deficit management plan in response to the safety valve programme. Section 12 discusses capital. So within the capital programme, it totals £551 million, of which spent around £90 million for the year 24-25. And some significant reprofiling took place. And then the report at the moment is showing 194 million for 25-26, which is currently being reviewed. And again, we'd expect that to be reprofiled as we move through the financial year. There are, however, within there some fairly major projects we're expecting to deliver within the 25-26 year, but the total headline 194 is somewhat ambitious at this stage, but will be refined as we go through the year. In terms of the sundry debt section, so overall the figures are relatively stable, and we can see kind of demonstrable improvements in collecting the historical debt. So I hope that provides some assurance that the figures that were outstanding on the Q4 paper from the previous year, you can see the absolute vast majority of that has been collected during the course of this year. So we're going to keep that historic debt down where possible. Section 15 around collection fund. So as ever, this is a significant part of the council's operations, in particular core to the financial management. The team essentially collect 98.8% of the council's net budget, so fund the vast majority of what the council does in terms of service delivery. Overall performance is relatively stable. There's a drop of 0.2% in our collection rates, in-year collection rates from the previous year. Members will probably remember that we are marginally above the unitary average, which was 96%. So for the previous year, so we will await the national benchmarking data to see whether that 0.2% dip is something which has been seen nationally, or if it's perhaps a little bit more acute to Dorset, and then we'll look to respond accordingly. And then final thing to say is I'm grateful that I'm joined by members of the senior leadership team in the chamber this evening, who I'm sure will be pleased to answer questions on specific directorate matters as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Roger Ong, co-opted member. 2 questions, I'm afraid. Page 59, your brief summary, it says, following presentation to Cabinet on 24th of June 25, the report comes to Cabinet. Does that not need to be coming to the Audit and Governance Committee?
It does. I think it's the way the paper's set out is it shows the Audit and Governance cover sheet and then shows the report as was for Cabinet. So I think it's just to do with how the appendix is set out.
Okay, thank you. The second question, though, I'd like to go then is to effectively page 63, which I'm just pulling up now, 5.2, if I got the right number. So 5.2, you talk about despite mitigations, governance framework, you feel that the risk should be put down as medium, which I get the sort of feeling that you put it down as medium because, as you say, the financial position of Dorset Council is actually probably better than other councils. Should we not actually be looking at the position that Dorset Council has technically a large deficit potential, of which a lot of action needs to be undertaken to go forward? And if it isn't able to be addressed or readdressed, then actually the risk is tremendous. So I'm just questioning why only medium. Thank you.
So the change in the status from kind of high on the risk rating was reflecting that the Q4 position improved on the revenue budget, but as you say, the residual risk remains high as at the time of writing this report, there was no national solution to the SEND deficit, and that was expected to come onto our balance sheet at March 2026. The announcement that the statutory instrument being extended, it pushes that out to March 2028. And you will probably no doubt expect that the first budget monitoring report for the new financial year will kind of resume a likely high risk as we kind of restart the process. But we did see some improvement towards the end of the year. That was the reason for it kind of lowering to medium, as it's happened now, and we didn't overspend by the kind of 11-12 million that was being forecast as at Q3. So there's an element of reserves have been preserved.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate that the reserves have covered some of that, and yes, the outcome was better than initially projected. But again, reserves are going down and down and down, so just look at the longer term. But thank you.
Thank you. Steve.
Is it on? Oh, there we go. Good evening, Steve Mercer from Blackmore Vale Ward. Before I ask my question, could I just say in April I asked a question at full council about brevity, if you remember. Could I just point out the pages for this evening are 424 pages, and I can't see an executive summary in there anywhere. That's rhetorical. I'll leave that one for you. We've talked a lot this evening about internal controls and governance. When I look at the year-end outturn, I can see one line which is £11 million overspent, 7.5% of the total budget, and another line which is 40% overspent, a smaller amount of £4.5 million over budget. Could I ask, Aidan, as the 151 officer, if directorates start to go into deficit, what additional checks and balances come into play to make sure that expenditure is appropriate and necessary? I get the impression sometimes that the budget manfully tries to keep up with the spend. It's a serious point about what checks and balances are there on spend from your role as an overview as the 151 officer.
Thank you. And I think page 65, you're highlighting on page 65 the variances there. So we, as a senior leadership team and as individual directorates, receive budget reports on a monthly basis. As Section 151, so Chief Finance Officer, and with Sean as my deputy, we meet each of the executive directors on a monthly basis and go through their financial reporting and look for the kind of the key messages, the headlines, and look for assurance on action being taken. So we have the individual conversations, but also as a senior leadership team, we meet collectively on a monthly basis as well. and understand and explore and hold each other to account of what the issues are. And some of it, and we've rehearsed a few times in this chamber, some of it is demand driven. So there's an element here of what can the other directorates do to try and help. So in terms of controls, we've had a vacancy, a very tight vacancy controls, and in some areas vacancy freeze for much of the last financial year to try and contain the spend in those directorates, but also to generate an underspend in some of those other directorates that particularly corporate and place as well to support the position. So we do have firm and challenging conversations, and then there's a political dimension as well. So we brief Councillor Clifford, Sean and I brief Councillor Clifford on a weekly basis on the financial position, and certainly on a monthly basis we talk about the financial performance. And 2 months ago, Councillor Clifford undertook a review with our support of each directorate and how it's looking for this financial year as well. So there's a whole series of meetings, formal meetings, looking for action, looking at the variables that can be controlled, but also a sense that an opportunity, if you need to do things differently, if it requires investment, an invest-to-save approach as well, but we appreciate that's a longer term. So you've got here, I suppose the three dimensions we're looking at is spend pressure from demand going up, but also income generation, is that on target? And also staffing budgets, kind of we use as the three key variables. So that's the assurance that I look for and the challenge I give. It might be an opportunity to ask colleagues, senior leadership team colleagues who are in the room about how it feels from their perspective, but I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you. I think at the last meeting we said that this is an area we would be concentrating on more in future meetings, where I think the statement was that the budgets go to pieces the day after the budget is agreed, and that we wanted to know more about why. You said there wasn't a summary. If there was a summary, I think it would probably say Dorset Council size gives huge sigh of relief as higher needs block kicked down the road yet again. So I think that would be our summary. No doubt Simon Clifford is breathing a sigh of relief as beads of sweat used to come to mind when I used to think about 2026. So the only joy of last year was I didn't have to think about it anymore. So, okay, anybody else? No? Okay, we'll move on then, which is to number 9, which is the financial statements for the year ended 31st March 2025. Which, Aidan, we're just the same, isn't it?
Thank you. So this, sorry, I was still on the last item. The financial statements, is that right? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So we've just talked about last financial year's performance. So I'm pleased, financial performance. So I'm pleased to be able to present the draft annual financial statements for 24-25. The lengthy document represents the Council's financial position and performance over the last year. As well as Dorset Council, we also incorporate the Dorset County Pension Fund, and we're required to as the accountable body, the host for the pension fund. So the statements have been prepared in accordance with the relevant accounting standards, but I'd particularly like to thank and acknowledge my colleagues, particularly those in the room here today, Heather, Rich and David here, and their teams have done amazing work to get us to this stage of the accounts. So the accounts are just for noting. Our external auditors, Grant Thornton, are going to take them away. They've already started on their external audit, and we should be looking, I think, November, coming back with the audit opinion on that. But happy to take any questions on the accounts as you find them.
Thank you. Didn't think it would be. So should we move on to 10? Right. 10, informing the 24-25 risk assessment, Dorset Council and Dorset Pension Fund. Sean.
Yes, good evening. So Sean Creamer, Corporate Director for Finance and Commercial. And this report in front of you covers the details on the questions received from Grant Thornton and the responses from Dorset Council officers. This essentially, as it sets out in the paper, forms the auditor's risk assessment for the audit of the 24-25 statements, i.e. the statements we've just been talking about, which follow the outturn we've just been talking about. The answers contained within them are therefore obviously how our external auditors, Grant Thornton, will plan to audit us in response to those risks identified. The response are detailed throughout the pages and cover both the council and pension fund and range from kind of general inquiries about transactions or any anomalies through to more specific things and areas of activity which external auditors would warrant further exploration. Answers have been provided by the relevant subject matter experts, so a range of officers across the organisation contribute to this, and the significance of bringing this paper to audit and governance is this is for awareness, so these are the risks that have been identified by officers, and then also therefore to ensure that members of this committee are cited on that key communication between officers and auditors saying this is the risks, or this is our perception of the risks, and therefore informs that risk assessment, which in turn drives the external audit opinion, which will come back later in the year, which in turn provides you with that crucial assurance that the committee will look to receive upon completion of that audit. So it's a kind of it's a communication document, but it's a key one for the members of this committee to see and I suppose have some assurance that it's a true and fair reflection of the current status. I'll pause there, and we do have colleagues from Grant Thornton in the room, so they may wish to also add or answer questions about what the significance of the document or how they use it going forwards.
Thank you. So the report is set out. You can clearly see the questions asked. Is there anybody who wants to raise a question on any of them? No? Okay. So we will move to 11, which is the Grant Thornton audit plan. And it'll be Julie.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much indeed, and good evening, councillors. Just by way of introduction, my name's Julie Mashey. I'm one of the audit directors within Grant Thornton. Just a little bit of background as to why I'm here presenting at committee this evening. Some committee members will already be aware that Jackson Murray was the appointed engagement lead from Grant Thornton for your previous year's audit for the 23-24 period. Unfortunately, Jackson has had to take some time away from the organisation while he supports his family through a serious healthcare matter. So at the moment, given the seriousness of the issue, we don't know the full extent of time that will be required, and therefore to make sure that we can give you assurance in terms of certainty over the delivery of the audit and ensure we can continue as planned in terms of our timetable. I've been brought in to support Sam and the colleagues of my team to make sure that we can deliver the audit to the required deadlines. So we have two papers for you on this evening's agenda. That is in relation to the audit plan for Dorset Council, but also separately the audit plan for the pension fund audit as well. My colleague Sam Harding is in the chamber and will take you through the council plan and give you the sort of key messages, and then I'll pick up then for the pension fund. So I'll pass over to Sam. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam.
Yeah, my name's Sam Harding and I'm an audit manager at Grant Thornton. So we are presenting our audit plan today for the 24-25 audit. Follows a similar format to the one that you will have seen from last year. And at this stage, we sort of highlight the key sort of areas of focus for our audit. So sort of to bring your attention to page 325 is where we set out our significant risk areas. They are, again, similar to what we had last year. So looking at management override of controls. So that's where management could sort of evade the controls to sort of perpetrate fraudulent financial reporting within the accounts. That is a standard risk that all audits have. It's not one we're able to rebut. And we focus our attention there looking at areas like journals and also sort of key estimates and judgments. So moving on, the other two sort of key significant risks also relate to land and buildings valuations and the net defined benefit liability. Now, those are large figures within your accounts, and they also contain a significant element of estimation. We're also giving an opinion on the value for money arrangement. So also on that page, So you'll be aware we did deliver our auditor's annual report last year, and there we identified some key recommendations. So those are the areas that we will be revisiting again this year, as well as undertaking further work around your arrangements for value for money, and we'll be delivering the auditor's annual report later in the year. Also, I think, as well as other risks, I think Heather and the finance team have pointed out IFRS 16. So that's a new change to accounting standards relating to leases. So that's been a significant piece of work that your finance team have had to undertake. So that's another area of focus for our audit. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Do you have any questions? Right, Belinda, and then I'll come to you now.
Thank you, Chair. Belinda Borden, Lyme Regis and Charmouth. With apologies for the naivety of this question, because I'm not from an auditing background, but to what extent do the findings from the internal auditors and the investigations that we're looking into influence the work of the external auditors? Is there a communications and sort of dividing up of who is looking at what?
Sam, would you like me to take that one?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we do have two different functions within the sort of assurance process, but we do meet regularly with internal audit. We do read their reports. Their reports do inform our risk assessment. We're not permitted to rely on the work of internal audit. We have to kind of do our own work, but clearly that does inform our risk assessment. So around the financial controls, because we do undertake a fully substantive audit, so we're very interested in the work that's on sort of payroll and key financial systems, but it's also a really key piece around our value for money work within the auditor's annual report. So obviously we have been reading their reports with interest and liaising with internal audit as we perform that work. So they are two separate functions, but clearly we do sort of take account of each other in the work that we do.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Neil, I think, Egerton Ward. So I just had a kind of follow-on question, very similar to Belinda's actually, in relation to the crystallisation of some of the control risks that have kind of happened over the past, or come to light over the past 12 months. And I mean, from my reading of some of the control failings, I would stick my neck out and say that there are both operation and design control failings, as well as examples potentially of management override, which I would presume to have had quite a significant impact on your materiality. So I just wondered, and how you approach testing as well. So I guess my question is, has there been an impact based on the crystallisation of control failings on materiality this year? And if so, how significant has that been? And in relation to then the impact it has on the testing that you're doing, I think you said you take a 100% substantive testing approach. And I just wondered why that approach was being taken rather than maybe looking at more of a controls-based testing blended with substantive testing.
Yeah, we
Sorry,
always...
Sam, I can't see you. I can't see you, Sam.
No, it's difficult. I'll let Julie take that for now.
Yeah, so in terms of the substantive audit approach, I think given in terms we have to look at this from an audit efficiency point of view, but also have to have regard to the effectiveness of the controls that are in place as well. So when we look at the different approaches, if we have any aspect of the controls that fail, ultimately we have to go back and do more substantive work to compensate for that anyway. And given that we are clearly aware that there are some areas of control deficiencies within the organisation, it doesn't feel an effective and efficient audit route to be able to apply a controls-based audit because of the level of controls testing we'd have to do before we then revert to a substantive approach. So we look at that across our audits, and generally speaking, we find a substantive approach is a much more effective way of addressing those potential risks, particularly given some of the findings that have been highlighted. The other aspect I would also say is in terms of where in particular would we consider some of those issues as part of our work. When we look at the particular approach to management override controls, the two key areas that we focus on are around testing around journals. and the management control of any sort of changes that have happened within the financial statements, particularly during the closing period when all of the accounts obviously are starting to be assembled and that reported position is starting to be finalised. So certainly around the year end and the post year end period is a particular area of focus. We also have a number of other risk criteria we look at based on information that we are aware of at the council, and we can run through some quite detailed data interrogation software. We use a number of different systems called Inflow that we can use to actually get a full download of journals from the finance system, and we can actually identify patterns and risk patterns and specific risk criteria that to then focus our attention and our work on those highest risk areas given some of the issues. So we can absolutely take into account that rounded position and that understanding as we design the specific procedures that we build into that software and that data interrogation that we look at.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much for that answer. I think it gives me a much better impression of the work that you carry out. Would you normally report back to us in relation to controls-based failures that you note? Is that something we should expect as part of the reporting back from external audits? Presumably, if you find any controls-based failings, you would report them back to us.
Yes, through you, Chair. Absolutely, we will, Councillor. When you receive our audit findings report in November, any areas where our substantive testing has failed, we have a duty to report, particularly if it's resulted in any audit adjustments, but also if there's any particular control findings, that will be subject to a separate action plan. And indeed, if you look at the back of the audit plan that you have within your papers today, you'll see that there's a follow-up to the action plan that was published from the back of the last audit at the end of 23-24. So we will also ensure, as well as reporting any new control deficiencies from our work, we will also formally follow up any findings and control findings from our previous year to make sure that those controls have been enhanced since the last time that we undertook the audit.
Steve.
And as part of the work you do with your the audit you're going to do, will you come back with recommendations as to where the red, amber, green in terms of controls lie, and enhanced testing that needs to go into those high-level, high-risk areas, or is that an internal issue or a swap issue? Because to get a professional input onto actually what needs to be done to put things right and stop things happening again would be very helpful.
Yes, so effectively we will design specific audit test procedures for every account balance that's within scope of our audit work. So obviously we receive the draft accounts, we've determined our materiality levels, and we will go down every line of the balance sheet, every line of the income and expenditure statement, and we will scope specific procedures and tests that we have to undertake for each of those account balances. Where we identify specific findings, we always have to ask ourselves the question, does controls need to be strengthened in light of any calculation errors or any audit errors? It may be a process type recommendation. It may be something has gone wrong that has led to these numbers then coming out wrong. So we always ask ourselves, what is the root cause of why this particular error has happened, and therefore does that warrant a specific recommendation? So that's the first thing. When we then identify those recommendations will then be in our action plan, and we do RAG rate all of our recommendations for those that we feel have the highest risk of material misstatement if not addressed, through to a green rating recommendation would be more of a best practice recommendation. So we do look at all recommendations on sort of all parts of the spectrum as part of the work that we do around internal controls. It's important to also say that this is not an internal audit. Internal audit has a very different kind of specific scope of work that they do around systems, but we do have a duty to report under the international standards of auditing that where control deficiencies have been identified during the course of our substantive procedures, we do have a duty to report those to you as the audit committee, as those charged with governance.
Yeah, sure.
Forgive me, I'm not clear as to, you talked about RAG rating your recommendations. I was talking more about RAG rating the risk areas and whether you will give an opinion on these are the areas you need to focus on. These would be reasonable steps that you would take, or is that not your role? Is that a swap role or an internal role?
No, we don't risk assess in that particular way. We look at the severity of the finding from the audit to say what is the potential, if this is not put right, what is the potential risk to the internal controls in terms of the finance system. We're looking at specifically around the internal controls purely relating to those systems that generate numbers for the statement of accounts. So obviously the breadth of work that internal audit will go beyond the financial systems. Our statutory responsibility as far as the financial statements concerned is looking at the financial systems and the design of the controls that generate numbers that find their way into the financial statements. So yeah, we will just identify the recommendations, but ultimately it will be down for officers to determine a course of action to address that particular finding.
Thank you for that. I understand that. There's clearly a piece of work we need to do internally or with SWAP, just to make sure that the high risk areas have all the checks and balances they need within them. Whether it's payments away on a bank account, agreeing contract, whatever the issues are, just make sure we know where the high risks sit and that the checks and balances we have are robust.
I wonder whether internal audit may wish to comment, because obviously there's a process that internal audit themselves will go through when they set their annual internal audit plan, that obviously there will be a number of risk factors and criteria that they will discuss with officers as part of that internal assessment of what are the key risk-based areas they want to focus on as part of that wider risk-based plan. So they may want to add some additional commentary, might actually help your question better, Councillor.
Would you like SWAP to make a comment at this stage? We do have an audit plan, so.
So I would expect, or I would like to see SWAP come forward with, these are the high risk areas. SWAP are our only internal audit function. There isn't another one that sits beneath SWAP, as I understand. So when it produces its investigation, I would expect to see, or I would like to see, right, these are your high risk areas. This is the testing that we think should go on to stop a replication of what has gone on in the last year or so, however. I wouldn't like to see something that just says, here it is, warts and all, and not what you're going to do, what you need to do to put it right.
Sally, do you understand? We're going to stray into next Monday's meeting if we're not very careful. So,
happy to attempt to answer that, but obviously any audit work that we do, we always agree actions with management, and obviously it is down to management to implement those actions.
I don't think you should necessarily shut up. I think it's something that we can follow up next Monday. We'll have a far better opportunity and more time available. Has anybody else got a question? I've just got one question for you. Okay, do you mind if I do I'll come to you first, Simon, then.
Just to come back with the previous comments, I think has been flagged up already, behaviour and culture have played an extremely big part in what's gone on. That isn't something that's necessarily easy to audit, but it is something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. So I've just got one question. During the paper, you did identify an other risk, and that is where, due to the legislation change to IFRS 16, you're going to have to bring on leases, even those with peppercorn rents, onto the balance sheet. Now, I know they're not material in most cases, but given what's happened in assets, what assurance can I have that you're actually going to be able to do that work, or whether it will be achievable within the audit programme? It could be you, it could be you.
I mean, I'm happy to start, Sam. I mean, so there's, I guess, the initial aspect of this. If we say what is the key risk around implementation of any new accounting standard, but particularly with the implementation of the leasing standard, the starting point, I think, that's important is what the council has done in terms of doing that initial completeness check of ensuring that they've fully identified all the different types of leases that are operating across the organisation, because that's the starting point, is that initial data gathering exercise to look at lease registers, speak to individual service areas to make sure they understand the full breadth of scope that this standard potentially is impacting. So that's the first bit that we would look at as part of our procedures, is to make sure we understand what the council themselves have done. I think the other aspect I would also say is that we've actually separately, not for audit clients, but for a number of other local authorities that we have been supporting through this implementation process, we've already identified some of the kind of common themes of where authorities may have not spotted things or overlooked things, or not necessarily interpreted the principles of what the standard is trying to look at was part of the implementation. So part of that initial inquiry will be to discuss with officers some of those kind of more red flag areas, as to make sure that we're comfortable that all the important ground has been covered in understanding what's within the scope of the standard. But absolutely, we've got a very sort of prescribed work programme that we will work through, and we're very confident that we will proceed through that work in a timely manner to ensure that we can conclude the audit. But ultimately, it will come down to the adequacy of the officers' process, and it may be that officers may wish to comment about what process they've gone through in terms of what information has been generated for the accounts that you considered earlier in this committee, to give committee some assurance that they have gone through that process rigorously. But absolutely, from our point of view, all of our team are adequately trained and in terms of understanding the requirements and the impact of the standard. As I said, we've got good expertise that we can draw upon from an advisory point of view to help flag those key areas. So yes, I can assure you that from our perspective, this should not cause any concern in terms of the audit delivery, so long as the records that the council have to support its position are adequate and complete.
Are you into rigorous assurance at all, Aidan, or sorry, are you into rigorous assurance? As Julie said, you might be able to give me some rigorous assurance that you were in a position to be accurate on the balance sheet lease items, or shall we leave it for another day?
So one, this might be a counterintuitive point, but members may remember in the last few years, one of the things that slowed down our production of the annual accounts has been around properties, basically, leases, the status, etc. And as a result, we've then had to do a lot more work to get those accounts out the door. Heather sat to my left and her team have done a lot of intensive work with the accounts, the assets and property team. So as a result, perhaps are in maybe a stronger position in terms of some of that underlying data, which, as Julie said, do you know the properties? Do you have the lease information? Do you know what you don't know, or what you didn't know in previous years? So as you touch wood, relatively confident that the work the team have done, that intensive kind of corrective piece of work that's been done over the last few years, and means we're in a reasonable position going into this.
Thank you. Belinda.
Yeah, thanks, Belinda Borden, Lyme Regis and Charmouth. What member involvement is there in this? Because respectfully, I would have to beg to differ on some of the information, because you're not asking me, and I've been asking who in the organisation I should tell about some of these issues locally. And if it's being replicated elsewhere, then I'm not confident that everything is known.
Well, I think Sean's answer is you don't know what you don't know, which I think he mentioned earlier on. But I mean, the list of assets and the valuations has been an issue since the commencement of the council, and it's been very difficult because you're merging 6 lots of assets into one council, and there have, without doubt, been issues and problems. I don't think that's any secret. We've never held back on any of that. My question was, now that it has to be part of the balance sheet, was what assurance we could get that we did know all of the leases, including those of Peppercorn, and we would be able to actually adhere to the audit plan. And that was my concern, that actually we wouldn't be able to, because as we still hadn't actually come to the end of that work. And unfortunately, the report coming to next Monday sort of is part of all of that. But that was all I was seeking, an assurance that the council was now happy that it had a definitive list of leases, regardless of their value, and that we would be able to confidently, or Grant Thornton would confidently be able to carry out that piece of audit work, because they've identified it as an additional risk, and that was all I was looking for, because under governance, that would seem to be the thing that, having identified it, I was looking for the assurance that you'd be able to give that information.
So at the moment, I'm not. So we work with the assets and property team, so obviously the information is only as good as the source information. But at the moment, I'm not aware of any reasons why the data we hold and the data that's been used to provide these accounts has got material misstatements or errors, which would mean we weren't able to complete the audit on this specific asset, this specific aspect for this year. So I'm hopefully able to give you the assurance that we have completed statement of accounts, and we anticipate that we will achieve the agreed audit plan as set out.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Parry, West Parley Ward. When we came together as Dorset Council, I seem to remember many references to the famous Donald Rumsfeld known unknowns, and there was a very long list of known unknowns in that sense, or thought to be at that time. Now, I'm guessing in the subsequent years, that list has been greatly reduced. So if you were to give us a for instance, of a known unknown, where do you think that would be?
Is that a question for me or for officers, Councillor? Sorry, it's difficult to read from the room.
Anybody would take a stab at it, please? Sure.
So it'd be tricky to put an exact. I wouldn't want to be forced to put an exact number on it, but I'd perhaps remind that the accounts that we're talking about, the level of materiality for the council financial statements is £19.2 million. So absolutely, there may be some aspects which are still being worked through, but in terms of the compliance with the accounts, we're not expecting there to be any issues. Again, this is famous last words, right? I'm not expecting any issues in relation to our compliance with IFRS 16 at the moment. Obviously, this is a new standard that's come in, so as ever, we welcome working with our external auditors to find and help us strengthen our approach to how we adhere to these standards going forwards. But we're not expecting the unknown unknowns or anything like that we've seen in previous years, because we are now a number of years on from that convergence. And as I say, where we have had those tricky controls or the tricky ability to get a definitive list of the assets, we've gone through that kind of improvement cycle and therefore done a lot of work to have a more reliable source information. So I'm more confident that we won't face difficulties because we've gone through that slightly painful process, in the same way that the questions earlier were saying, if swap identify a control weakness, what have you done about it? well, ideally you've closed the weakness and strengthened the best practice as a result of that finding. So using that same logic, I'm confident that the slightly painful close down process we've gone through the last few years in relation to assets has meant we are stronger and better equipped, again, ideally for going through this work with our external auditors, and we would welcome any feedback or further improvement that they're able to identify through this process, in the same way that when we work with our internal auditors, while some of the findings are uncomfortable, we welcome that because it enables us to improve controls going forwards and be better as a result.
Okay, thank you. All done, or do you want a supplementary, Andrew?
Okay, if I can come back on a slight variation on theme there then. There's also a stockpile, so we'll come to the known unknowns another day by the sounds of things, okay? But there's also a stockpile of the too difficult to do anything about piles. And where are we with those? Because those were the issues that were very time consuming to resolve. They were likely to cost us a lot of money. They were politically sensitive. They were all sorts of manner of things. But when I was a cabinet member, I was made aware that a lot of that had been worked through, admittedly at some cost in some cases, which we'll discuss another day. But what's your sense check on the too hard to do pile? What progress are we making and who's monitoring it?
Are we talking property here specifically? Are you able to come in and help as our property lead in this?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Jan Britton, Executive Director for Place Services. As you know, and the Chair has already said, the Council inherited a mixed bag of property from predecessor councils. Some of that property was itself poorly maintained and came into Dorset Council in a state that wasn't really acceptable, and we've been working hard to rectify that. You'll know some of the circumstances around that and some of the things that have happened in relation to that compliance work. But it remains the case that the council's property records are they're a lot better than they were, but they're a long way short of what they need to be. The records that relate to the budget, I have confidence in the work that's done to put a valuation on property. But I think if you start going any deeper than that, you start running into difficulty. To characterise it, I would say we probably know a lot about a lot of different properties, but relatively little of that is on the relevant computer system listed against that property. So if you want to know what the 1999 survey said of a particular building in Swanage, you've got to go and find that 1999 document because the computer system doesn't hold that data. So there's a lot of information, but not quite as much knowledge as I would like. I think your question was about known unknowns and the management of property. We are still going through that process of understanding what exactly we own, what exactly our liabilities are. Quite often what our liabilities are to other people who've leased properties from us, or indeed their liabilities for buildings that are ours, but they have repairing responsibilities for. The council's been going through this work for, I've not been here for long, but as cabinet member, you were involved with some of that work prior to my arrival. I imagine it's probably been going on since Dorset Council was formed. In truth, the work we're doing at the moment to turn around property services and create a department that's fit for purpose is going to take another 12 months. We're starting at quite a low base, but even when we've got a department that's fit for purpose, a lot of the work that department needs to do still remains to be done. This is a job for the long haul. This was never right since the creation of Dorset Council. And the job of putting it right is still ongoing.
I'm sure you can probably predict my question then, which is, are you confident you've got adequate resource in order to be able to deliver your intentions? If not, what's missing?
The council has put a huge amount of money into compliance work in property services. I hesitate to come before this committee and ask for even more money. But it is nevertheless the case that the speed of bringing records and systems up to a standard is going to require a fairly substantial amount of investment. And I continue to have discussions with my finance colleagues about that as we work our way through that journey.
Thank you. No more? So we will move to, just for note and comment, by the way, so we will move, thank you to Grant Thornton, by the way, thank you for attending.
Chair, would you like me to cover the pension fund as well, or?
I completely missed that, yes. Anybody? Yes, please do. Sorry.
I'll be very, very brief just to give you the highlights. I mean, the structure of the plan is very similar to that of the council. Probably the key page I would draw members' attention to is page 376, which highlights the significant risks in relation to the pension fund audit. And as Sam has already highlighted, the management override controls risk is a presumed risk across all audits. That will feature as part of our plan for this particular audit. But the other two significant risk areas are in relation to valuation of level 3 investments. There's different categorization of investments within the pension fund net asset statement. Level 1s are the easier to value investments where they're published on a listed stock exchange, and you can get that data on a daily price basis straight from a published website. Whereas level 3 are the other end of the sort of fair value hierarchy, where those are much more judgmental. It relies on management and other experts' estimation to determine appropriate values to hold those investments at the year end. And so from our perspective, we need to do a lot more work and give a lot more scrutiny to the basis in which those estimates and the assumptions that underpin those estimates and how they've been calculated. And then the third area is around directly held property. Within the sort of kind of £4 billion worth of pension fund assets you've got, there's a couple of £100 million within that of directly held property, which are obviously subject to its own separate valuations as well. And we need to do specific work around the underlying assumptions that form the basis of those property valuations. That's probably the key things I would want to draw your attention to in terms of the risk areas for the pension fund. But again, Chair, thank you. Happy to take any specific questions on the pension fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any specific questions? I think it's fairly straightforward. Questions are in the papers. So unless you have any additional, I'll move on. Thank you. So I'll move on to 13, which is the work programme. Any comments? We did adjust it last year to the last meeting to include Grant Thornton's reports. I have nothing else to add. Anybody? Maybe we will after next week. Okay, well in that case, 14 urgent items. There are no urgent items, and 15 exempt business, no exempt business. Fantastic. At this temperature, we can go. Thank you for attending. Thank you. Everybody online as well.